Hello and welcome to today's episode of We Used to Be Journos. My name is Jan Fran and I am one half of the hosting duo of this podcast. The other person sitting across from me is Antoinette Latouf.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, this is the part where we insert banter.
Insert banter. It does say in the script insert banter. So
Yeah.
do you have any banter that you would like to insert?
I always have banter.
I don't know who told us that this is what people should do
Yeah.
on podcasts. It's
Yeah.
just insert banter.
Banter. Okay, so I met Claudia Carvin last week and I posted a picture, and I love her, the actress, she's brilliant. And I posted a picture and I suggested in the caption, I was like, do you think it's too forward if I ask Claudia Carvin to be my best friend? And, tagged Claudia as well. So I was like, I'm clearly being too forward. Please, give me your thoughts in the comments. And lots of people were like, yeah, I love Claudia. You guys would be such good besties. But much to my surprise, so many people were in there going, but what about Jan? How's Jan going to feel? Isn't Jan your bestie? And I'm like, get out of my comments talking about Jan. I'm pretty sure she doesn't give a shit.
I mean, I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
I didn't even think I follow you on Instagram. That's not true. I do.
Ow, Jan, ouch. But I'm thinking maybe if I became friends with Claudia, then she'd give me some comments, like words of affirmation that you don't give me.
But I love that people had my back in the comment section, though. Even though, we spend way too much time with each other enough as it is, frankly.
We do.
Thank you. Thank you to all my supporters. I appreciate it. All right, that was good banter.
Yeah, I think banter did. Banter did good.
We inserted that banter pretty well. What is in today's show, Antoinette?
Okay, so our big chat in the second half of the show is about news fatigue. What it is, how to identify it, and that tension between staying informed, not looking away, still being critically engaged, still critiquing the news, and not spiraling into despair. And we've got some really good tips, mainly for ourselves.
Yes.
That may also be useful.
Because one of
for
the
everyone
reasons
listening
that we picked this this topic, is really the vibe.
Yeah,
and
our vibe.
Our vibe. And I say that literally. We both had we're in a bit of a state of news fatigue, I would say, last week, and really feeling it. So we thought, let's explore what it is, because it's a thing that other people are feeling as well, borne out by the statistics. So
we'll finish with it's a yes from me. And this week, I don't know, it was easier for me. Probably, I don't know, was it for you as well than other weeks to find something to give a high five to?
Yes, I had a yes. I have a strong yes, which is about the reporting around the Bendigo Writers Festival, which was a massive cock up. We'll explain that a little bit later in the show. But my focus, my yes, my high five was to the independent media outlet that broke the story, or had the story first, and then broke a very, very significant follow.
Yes, because we do have some tea, I've got some media tea on The Age commissioning one of the Palestinian writers at the centre of these pro-Israel lobby attacks, and then why they never ran the piece. But that's later in the show. First, though, our favourite part, we get to stick the boot in. It is a no from me. Jan, what have you got?
Stick the boot in, analyse, however you want to say it, however we're feeling today. My no from me comes courtesy of the West Australian. Okay, the big newspaper there in WA. Here is the background on this.
Okay.
So there's record-breaking coral bleaching happening in Ningaloo in WA. Ningaloo is this beautiful sort of, marine area. Think like Great Barrier Reef fish, very, very touristy, very pristine. Scientists say that the bleaching is happening because of the longest, largest, and most intense marine heat wave ever recorded in WA. Fairly significant, right? Naturally, this made headlines around the country. The Guardian carried it, ABC, the Nine papers had it, The Conversation, the BBC had it. The BBC did a big feature about it. 7:30 did a whole feature story about it, right? And I just want to play you a little bit from the 7:30 story so you kind of get a sense of the, scale.
There is no doubt that this is the worst that WA has experienced, and when you combine it with the Great Barrier Reef, it's the worst bleaching event in Australia's history.
Yeah, wow.
The worst bleaching event in Australia's history, right?
Yeah.
Did the West Australian have a front page about this event? Just hazard a guess, 50-50.
Oh, my gut is telling me, nah.
No.
Yeah.
Did it have the story anywhere in the paper.
Towards the back, maybe?
Look, the only story that I managed to find was one online story that was syndicated from AAP. So it was a journo at AAP who wrote it, and then a follow written by a journo at the West Australian that carried a lot of that story plus the reactions of WA's Environment Minister.
Okay.
Right? So no original reporting per se by the West Australian newspaper for the worst coral bleaching ever recorded off the coast of WA. Is that weird?
Yeah, because especially given it had such a big run on the 7:30, on The Guardian, the BBC, The Conversation.
All of
them.
It
was covered comprehensively everywhere else.
Yes. However, do you know what I did find on the front pages of the West Australian newspaper? You know. Ads for Woodside, which is one of the largest oil and gas producers in Australia, right? So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see we've got the last 2 weeks of front covers of the West Australian. And in 1 week, which was when this story was being covered by all of the other outlets, in 1 week, there were ads on 3 front covers.
Jan, are you suggesting that the largest petroleum company based proudly in the WA is influencing the West Australians' editorial output?
I would never suggest such a thing. I am simply observing that in a week where most other news outlets carried the story about the worst coral bleaching off the coast of WA, the West Australian newspaper had 3 front pages plastered with ads for Woodside. And that's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
That's what I saw.
It's not only the West Australian. What about 7 News, Perth? I'd be keen to see, because they're owned by the same people.
It.
Yeah, what their treatment was. Because they're owned by the same
Yes, so Kerry Stokes, it's like 7 West Media, they own the West Australian, they own Channel 7. Channel 7 ran like an LVO, which is, for those that don't know, a live voiceover, which is when the presenter just reads over images of the reef, right? And it ran for about 30 seconds. However, what was interesting is if you want to compare apples and apples, Channel 9 Perth did run a full story, did run a full what's called a package, which is when they have the reporter on, the scene, talking about the reef, and it was about 2 minutes.
Well, we have mentioned in previous episodes that Kerry Stokes owns 7 West Media, so he owns the West Australian and 7 News. But what you may not know, although many on the West Coast do know, Kerry Stokes also owns $100 million worth of shares in Woodside Petroleum, but it doesn't end there, because 7 Group, which is run by his son Ryan, has a 30% stake in Beach Energy, which exports gas through Woodside facilities. So there is a lot of convenient crossovers there.
There's a lot of convenient crossovers.
Yeah.
And like Woodside is making, no one's hiding the association at all. Like if you go on Woodside's Instagram page, this was just on Sunday, there's a video of the Prime Minister and Kerry Stokes, who owns 7 West Media, at something called the Resources Technology Showcase. Okay. Which does exactly what it says on the box. It's a massive exhibition that, showcases resources technology. What's interesting about it is that 7 West Media puts it on. Right? So, not only does Kerry Stokes have $100 million worth of shares in Woodside, not only does he have, a massive 30% stake in Beach Energy, which uses Woodside, but the whole media enterprise runs a thing called the Resources Technology Showcase.
Okay.
The thing is that Kerry Stokes has a sort of monopoly of information in WA, right? Again, this is not a big secret.
No, it's not a secret at all.
Owns the West Australian, but they've also got a bunch of regional papers that they own. Owns perthnow.com.au, which is this free online thing. Owns digital publication The Nightly. Owns Channel 7.
Yeah, I have a funny story. So 7 West Media owns the only printer of major newspapers in Western Australia.
That's true,
Last year, they doubled the price of printing for 9 papers, which meant that 9 had to stop the print editions of the Australian Financial Review in WA. But apparently News Corp papers didn't get the same cost hike.
But it's so wild that that is a strategy available to Seven West Media. It's like, how can we get rid of one of our competitors? Should we outcompete them with content and drive?
Yeah.
No, we will hike the price of their printing.
Wow.
And so that's exactly what happened. The Fin was like, well, we can't print here anymore. So now the Australian Financial Review does not have a print circulation in WA. And in addition to it's truly the Wild West.
It's just a story that keeps on giving.
It's so
there
good.
are so many no's in this.
There's a newspaper in WA called The Post, which runs in Perth's kind of like wealthy suburbs, right? So this newspaper has always been a thorn in the side of like Seven West because people read it. Like it's got a decent circulation. Yeah. It is investing in its own printing press so that it doesn't have to rely on Kerry Stokes' printing press
but
in
also
WA.
Question.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the digital age. Like, do we really need to print that many papers?
I don't know.
I guess there is an arm. Actually, those business papers like to have, like the Fin Review likes to be in offices and in front of accountants and in airport lounges and whatnot.
And
they get picked up
like
there and on airplanes.
And sure, some people like to have a flick there through the newspaper. Either way, like your circulation shouldn't be dependent on the one owner of the main printing press in WA. You know what I mean?
Fair.
So, real stronghold of monopoly. And, the big question is like when it does come to coverage of climate issues that clash with the resource industry, if you have a one-paper town where the owner has a lot of
who owns one of the television networks as well.
And who owns quite a lot of shares and investment in various resource companies. Like, how can we ensure that Western Australians are in fact getting the correct and full story?
Well, they're not. So take note, you're not.
Can I just tell one story?
Sure.
I wonder if this has just reminded me of a time that I was on the Sea Shepherd covering a story for SBS about James Price Point, which is in northwest WA, right?
So Sea Shepherd's like an environmental activist.
Yeah, boat. They had a bunch of media on the boat and I was one of them. It was extraordinary. It was amazing. We were going over the biggest humpback whale nursery in the world. Mm-hmm. That was the pitch. And it was because there was a gas and oil project off the coast. And I remember being on that boat and something was wrong with because I was shooting myself. Heaven help us, never going to do that again. Yeah. But there was something wrong with my camera and Bob Brown was on the boat and he was like, hey, we've got to get this woman's camera fixed. Like he was doing everything that he could to help me sort out what the issue with the camera was. And I was like, why is this guy like hell-bent?
He's very nice.
But he is. He's very nice. But he was like, you're from the East Coast, aren't you? You're from SBS, East Coast, right? And he just wanted as much information as possible to get to the East Coast about what was happening.
Yeah.
And I look back at that moment now and I'm like, that's really interesting that, the big environmental news in WA is often focused or, beamed to an East Coast audience, either because East Coasters, I don't know, either care more or maybe the West doesn't care as much or doesn't get as much information. Not sure. Just reminded me of that story.
Good story.
Yeah.
Good banter.
So the Sea Shepherd, being on the Sea Shepherd is a yes from me. That was fucking awesome. But the rest of it, no from me.
Okay. Well, my no from me. You've probably heard about the anti-immigration marches that are scheduled to take place around the country.
I've heard only smatterings on social media that I flick from very quickly.
Well, to quote the organisers, it's to take our country back. And if you hadn't heard about it across social media, which is where most people are seeing it because it's being spread by conservative and far-right groups, and the Daily Telegraph lent in to be very helpful. Because this caught my eye in the telly because they were taking a break from the usual stance of demonising climate change protesters or anti-genocide protesters or just talking about how much it costs in police resources to have protests. So, and I just thought this is unusual because they're not doing their usual negative framing. They felt very much like they were helping out. And how do I know this? If you think, well, Antoinette, you're jumping to conclusions. Why do you think they're helping out? It's because they use the organisers' poster as the cover image.
Of the story?
Of the story.
Oh.
So if you didn't know what was happening or where it was, the Daily Telegraph was there to help. Not only in the cover image, which you'll be seeing right now, also embedded in the story, another version of the poster. and then also written in within the text of the story. So you had 3 opportunities at the Daily Telegraph to find out how to get to one of these protests, which they also in the story point out that part of the promotion was using images of Cronulla riots, which were also very anti-immigration and hostile.
Hang on, part of whose promotion?
The organisers.
The organisers were like,
yes,
yeah, let's do that again.
They're actually going,
Jesus.
and there are some concerns about invoking Cronulla riots, but here are the details if you don't have them for the 3rd time.
Oh man, the Daily Telegraph just flyering for these guys. It's like, don't worry about putting flyers in people's mailboxes. Why not just get them into the main paper of Western Sydney?
They were doing that, and they also noted that the protesters hadn't yet had police approval. And we know that that's sometimes just a bureaucratic step. You need to let the police know what the locations are. So noting within the article that there hasn't been police approval, that they're invoking imagery of the Cronulla riots, and then just being very helpful to be like, but anyway, guys, if you haven't caught it, here is where it's going to happen.
Right.
And so the thing about the what's unclear about the March for Australia, we don't know exactly who's organising it.
Right. Do we know anything about it? Like, I mean, I almost feel like I don't want to tell anyone. Like, I don't want to do what the Daily Telegraph is doing, but I also feel like we need to talk about it. Like, it's a weird line.
Well, on the one hand, I am all for the right to protest. It's a civil liberty to protest. You know, if anything, I've been critical of the media demonising protests, so I'm not there to do that. It's just curious that the Daily Telegraph seems rather invested in this coalition of nationalist patriots and everyday Australians. That's how they describe themselves. That, you know, they're demanding an end to migration, and they're telling everybody that you can only bring an Australian flag, no foreign flags, no Aboriginal flags. And so for me, it's the repetition of all the details and amplifying that one of the organisers was sharing vision from the Cronulla riots. I don't know, it just felt a little bit incendiary, just a little bit.
We're also like, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm like very much hold a deep and personal grudge about the Cronulla riots that I have not forgotten and will never forget about.
Well, the media's role in it.
Oh, yes.
That's the grudge.
Everything.
All of it.
All of it.
Except for that one cop who was trying to, like, do you remember that images of that cop trying to protect who didn't end up being an Arab, just someone with brown skin? Do you remember that image of him with the bat and trying to protect that guy who they just were like, him? And he was like an Indian international student.
Yeah, I really didn't think I would be going deep into the imagery of the Cronulla riots today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, they are. I do find them triggering, especially because, like, as you say, the media's role in the Cronulla riots is quite well known. Like, I remember Alan Jones at the time was the big one, who he essentially told people to go down to Cronulla to let me quote what he said. He said, you should go down to, quote, a rally, a street march, call it what you will, a community show of force. I'll call it a race riot, I reckon.
And then he proceeded to share the details at 12 or whatever it was, at 12 o'clock at this point.
Yeah. And then he was found guilty of inciting hatred in the lead up to the Cronulla riots.
Yeah.
And, you know, widely condemned for doing that. And it feels like, I guess from what you're saying, the Telegraph is doing just like the low level version of that. Like, hey, we're not telling you to go down and show a community show of force, but here's the flyer three times.
I'm going to take it a little bit further because you could just say, you know, they accidentally published the details 3 times about where the protest was. But just a few days ago in the Daily Telegraph was an opinion piece, and it was by columnist Lucy Zelic, who most actually know for her soccer commentary on SBS, but more recently she's become a bit of a conservative commentator about trans issues, and now it seems Australian patriot type stuff. Because this piece, which ran just a few days prior, was called How About We Protest for Australia? And there was a video embedded within this story, and let's just take a listen.
Okay.
While, of course, none of what we're experiencing at the ground level is comparable to the horrors unfolding in the Middle East, so many people were prepared to protest for a war 14,000 kilometres away, but would they ever be prepared to protest for our own country, to save our own country? I cover this and so much more in this week's column.
So much more was covered in the
Okay, I did not read the column. Did you
Okay.
read the column? What is?
Yeah,
what-
so
what-
there was a whole shopping list of what we should be protesting for. So this was in opposition to. She took issue with the March for Humanity Save Gaza protest across the Harbour Bridge.
Okay.
She had a shopping list of broad statements about, hey, but you should be worried about cost of living, energy prices, housing affordability, and don't worry, because there was a line in there about making sure we don't go anywhere near negative gearing, because union bosses are suggesting limiting negative gearing and capital gains discounts. And then she went on to talk about immigration levels. So it's like, there is a cost of living crisis. We should worry about our own issues. Don't touch capital gains tax or inequality or negative gearing. But how about those migration levels?
Okay.
It felt like a signal flare. And I found it.
A dog whistle. You mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both. A dog.
A signal flare. I've never heard that. Did you make that up?
I mean, does it not work?
It works. I got it.
It's a signal flare, a dog whistle.
Yeah, sure.
And I find it entirely coincidental, if not curious, that one day there is an op-ed stirring fear and making calls to, why don't we protest for Australia? And then a few days later, it's like, and here are all of the details of these ultra-nationalist kind of crazy people who want to end immigration, don't bring any foreign flags, no Indigenous flags ready, because we're doing it for Australia, for Australian issues. And I'm
we're not saying that that's good, but we're simply putting these two things together in the paper.
I just found it hilarious that it was like, yeah, we've got like housing affordability and it's not negative gearing, everybody, and it's not tax inequality, but them bloody migrants.
Right.
Which anybody who, and I was just like, I mean, I kind of feel like I kind of get a sense of what's going on here. And it feels gross in my stomach.
Yes. I see why that's a no from you.
Yeah.
There is a bigger question around, like, how does the media cover the far right? Because we've seen, there's been, Nazi protests in Melbourne, for example, outside of shopping centres, and in the CBD, when Nazis wearing black are just protesting through the streets. And I think, one of the criticisms that you made in a previous episode, again, probably rightly so, was like, it did not get the media coverage that it deserved. Like, you have Nazis out in the streets. The other side of that coin is that these dropkicks want media coverage.
I tell you what you don't do. You don't publish a poster for this unauthorized rally of crazy faceless people 3 times in your article and use it as your cover image. That's what you don't do.
Sure.
We can debate what you can and should do, but this is, for me, is a red flag of what you don't do.
Yeah. Okay.
That is a no from me.
That's a no from you. All right. Speaking of no's, I mean, I don't know whether all of these no's from us are sort of wearing on us somewhat. Do you think that looking at the media and all its follies and foibles and fuck-ups is impacting our mental health?
I mean,
are you okay? Are you okay, Dave?
I'm better. I'm better this week. Are you okay?
Good. Yeah. Good.
Because last week you had to step away from work for a little bit.
I did. So, look, we're going to talk about news fatigue and news avoidance.
Yeah.
And these two are they're real things that have been, interest in news has been declining over the last decade. This is a worldwide trend. But I guess the reason that we wanted to talk about it this week is we don't have a very sophisticated way of choosing our topics necessarily.
Sure we do. Sure we do.
It literally is the vibe.
It was your vibe.
It was my vibe.
Because you did have to step away from work. You're like, I can't look at, like, I need.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But at the same time, Nigel on Blue Sky sent a message going, I love watching the interplay, the love of friends, the intelligence, the anger, the honesty of Antoinette and Jan Fran, but sometimes I can't watch, not immediately. I'm not brave enough. I'm too sore, too sad, or too enraged, and I'm nowhere near Palestine. So obviously last week's episode focused heavily on the targeting and killing of Anas al-Sharif and his colleagues in Gaza, and we really struggled to get through that episode. We've struggled to work ever since, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely struggled this last week, and the way that I know that it's kind of like news avoidance in the traditional sense, which is like avoiding legacy media news, is because I have to do a bunch of research for this episode that I simply did not want to do. I just felt this really strong urge to not watch the news at all. Like, even Insiders this week, normally I'd watch it, I'd skim through it, I'd get across it. I was like, I can't do it. I cannot do it today. And so there was like this feeling of just heaviness, of overwhelm, of like a lack of clarity in my brain. And that was when I said to you, I was like, I can't do any work today. I'm just going to go for a walk.
Yeah.
I did say that.
3 hours later.
Yeah. I think it was maybe a half a day later.
Yeah.
Hey, it was a long walk. But so we wanted to kind of explore, okay, if I'm feeling this way.
And Nigel's feeling it.
Yeah. And we just know that other people are feeling it, whether you're, you know, as engaged with the news coming out of Gaza as we are, whether or not you are, it's a thing that's been happening right around the world for a decade.
And I think it's compounding crises. Obviously, it was a global pandemic. Now the genocide, the cost of living and economic strain. I mean, First Nations inequality is worsening. The environmental collapse, not that you'd know that if you were reading the West Australian. The wave of natural disasters. And I'm personally still reeling from Jessica Alba splitting from her very hot husband, producer husband, Cash Warren. There is a lot of bad news.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, things go from bad to worse, don't they? When will this end?
They just do. Oh. But why don't you talk us through, because we've said, you know, news fatigue, news avoidance, exactly what it is.
So it's basically people who say that they deliberately avoid the news. So there was a survey that every year the University of Canberra does a thing called the Digital News Report. And this year, 69% of people surveyed said that they would often, sometimes, or occasionally avoid news, which honestly, I thought it would be higher.
Yeah.
Like I thought every single human on this planet would say that they occasionally at least avoid the news.
I suspect, though, they're thinking about news in the traditional sense, in that they go and seek it out. But there's all this incidental consumption of news, which you don't even mean to see. You used to make a conscious decision to watch the TV or open a newspaper. So that's probably why that figure doesn't feel as high as we think.
Yeah. And that's probably why you do have news fatigue and avoidance, is because you're actually getting news against your will.
Yeah.
You don't intend to get it, but you're getting it hundreds of times a day via social media or whatever it is.
Trust in news has also been steadily declining. So 38% of Australians say in 2025 that they trust the news. If you compare that to 2021, it was 51%.
That's a huge drop. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's really significant. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer, those most likely to not trust the news are also younger audiences, but those who are less educated and on lower incomes. That comes from the Reuters Institute. And that's also like mirrored in other studies. There's a book that came that was published by Cambridge University Press that also found that it was those who are younger or more disadvantaged who have less trust in the news. So yes, people are thinking, oh my God, it's all doom and gloom, where they're trusting the news less. But if the news poorly represents you, there was a sense that the authors came out of like, you know, why consume something that makes people look bad? So whether you're working class or you're from a minority community, we're fatigued because there's doom and gloom, but we're fatigued because we're sick of seeing shitty representation of us. So there are so many factors.
Doom and gloom to some extent has also been the modus operandi of the news. Like it absolutely thrives on conflict. Oh my God. My son is 3 and watches the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay, this feels like a side story, but there is a character in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles called April O'Neil, who is a journalist.
Oh, I remember her.
And her boss is like the typical newsman, you know, who's like, go and find me a story. Yeah. We need conflict. We want this city on edge.
And you're like, that is pretty much Australian newsrooms. Thank you, April O'Neil and the Turtles.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, cartoon show from 1987 that somehow still rings very true today. So like conflict has sort of always been at the heart of news. And this idea of kind of like giving audiences what they want, like scintillating things, you know, car crashes, crime, and worthy stories that were often, I don't know, deemed like they're called in the industry, they're called vegetables because nobody wants to eat them, but they're good for you.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like you should have them. And so even on Question Everything, which is a comedy show, we still wanted to get the vegetables across. So we'd like couch it in comedy. Yeah. But I was the vegetables person.
Yeah,
like
right.
I'm like, okay,
so we'd have to like pour gravy and tomato sauce over you to make it more interesting.
Yeah, because you need that kind of like almost adrenaline.
Well, that's that whole if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
You know, and I worked in commercial television for several years. And if you try and pitch a story to editors, it often, you know, sometimes it will get turned away because it's like, oh, that's too serious, or that's going to make people feel bad at dinner time. And it was like, you don't think somebody being stabbed is going to make people feel bad at dinner time, but you know, a story, an interesting story about a marginalized community will, like, it didn't. Now that I look back at it, that'd be like, and then because you're young and you want to get stories up, you're like, well, now I'm only going to pitch. The last 4 I've pitched kept getting knocked back, so now I'm going to be like, hey, guess what? I've got this CCTV of somebody was waving a baseball bat at 7-Eleven, like, yes, top story, crime out of control. And then you just stop pitching the other stories because you want a story to get up. Like it's a bit of it's a cycle.
Yeah, a self-sourcing pudding, if you will.
Yeah. So that's a bit of, I guess, you know, insiders, you know, intel about the stories that get coverage. But I guess I want to talk about what you do to combat that fatigue and how you came back. Because you did eventually come back from that long walk. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're in like a particular position of like, this is our job and our industry. So for me, I'm kind of like able to I guess I have to work very hard to compartmentalize and say, right, well, I have to look at this from like an observer perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I can do that much easier than just as a consumer.
What does that mean?
Like it means that like if I'm just watching the news for the sake of watching the news, I struggle a bit more than watching the news for the sake of, you know, analysing it or finding bits to go in the script or doing research. Because I find that like that bleeds into my life a little bit more than what the work element does. Like I can put some parameters around the work stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of combating news fatigue and not wanting to watch it, not wanting to engage, I have no combat for it other than going for long walks. Seriously.
No, but don't you lock yourself out of your phone sometimes?
Oh yeah, I have a social media blocker.
Yeah,
I do, but I've circumvented that.
Because you were like, it's ironclad. I can't do it. And you're like,
I know, but then I chat GPT how to circumvent the blocker. Because, mate, I have a small brain injury from all of the internet work that I do.
I do want to point out that like news fatigue isn't inherently bad. It's your body and your mind signaling that you need a mental break. The real issue is news avoidance. And that's when fatigue turns into disengagement. And the risk with avoidance is that you miss essential information that you need for daily life or political participation. So I guess like don't feel bad that you're feeling fatigue. We should just be concerned if that leads to being completely disengaged. And the fact that those most likely to be disengaged are younger, are from lower socioeconomic groups or more marginalized groups, for me is concerning for our democracy. It's concerning for political participation. That's where...
That's true. Actually, there was something that that I saw. I think it was from that book that you just quoted a little bit earlier from the University of Cambridge or Columbia, one of the others. Anyway, they said that because news avoidance is so common among disadvantaged groups, what it does is it kind of exacerbates these existing inequalities because the mainstream media will then kind of just tilt further towards more privileged audiences. Because they're the ones that are engaging and they're the ones that are paying. And so they're the ones that the news starts servicing. And when I saw that, I had like, the first thing that popped into my mind was the coverage of the Sydney Morning Herald, which in recent years, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed, is very like private school stories about the housing market, stories about hospitality and, you know, Merivale restaurants and whatnot. And I think like, who is that type of journalism actually for? Well, it's for people that can, one, afford to buy a house and so care about the housing market.
Well, the demographic of journalists as well. You know, more likely to be privileged in a city and older. So at the Morning
that's
Herald.
Another thing that you kind of, you know, that's a separate discussion, but also playing into this. But this is like in terms of avoiding the news, it's like, well, the news just starts tilting towards the people that are not avoiding it, who happen to be privileged and slightly wealthier and slightly more educated and probably slightly older. Yeah, exactly. And so what happens when the news only starts serving them? You're exactly right. You kind of get locked out of that like sort of, you know, civic participation or find news elsewhere on the internet, which is just like a man in a white coat in front of a green screen pretending to be a doctor that my mother falls for.
So something I'm using to try and combat my news fatigue is, God, the freaking Scandinavians always have the answer. I just hate that Scandinavians just always know what to do 5 to 10 years before the rest of the world does.
They do feel like advanced, which is annoying.
Good for them, not so great for us. Okay, so they, out of Denmark comes this theory or this school of journalism called constructive journalism. And it was developed at the Constructive Institute in Denmark. And it seeks to shift news from that negativity bias towards solutions and nuance and kind of democratic conversations. Because sometimes when you read something, it's like, well, the environment is screwed. Humans are awful. We're just, genociding people before our eyes. It's just all shit. We can't afford a house. I just feel terrible about it. And how it works. And we know that it works because there are follow-ups. Within the stories, there are agreed actions.
Okay.
They talk about shared accountability. And it might just sound, well, that sounds very lovely in theory. But trials in these Scandinavian newsrooms, like Norway's NRK, Sweden's SVT, have reported since leaning towards that sort of solutions-based journalism, where it's not just solutions, but we talk about accountability. And so what happens if this doesn't, if this isn't reached? They've reported increased audience trust, higher engagement, and more, this is interesting, more return participations by politicians and experts. So it's not
what
like
does that mean?
Well, they're not scared of coming back on the show because they're going to be held accountable. It's not like, oh, that's going to be a hard, I'm going to be pulled up on the fact that 7 months ago,
Does it feel like more of a good faith thing or something? Like everyone's coming in good faith. No one's trying to
Well, no one's trying to dodge accountability or, these ones are going to give me a hard interview. So I'm just going to go and do an influencer podcast, which we see that our authority figures and politicians are trying to do.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, look, I know a little bit about constructive journalism, not a lot. And it sounds like... it sounds like the antithesis of like everything that journalism is based on, which is news is something that someone doesn't want printed and the rest is advertising.
Yeah.
I'm only doing the news because someone doesn't want it to be here, right? But it feels like a complete rethink of the way in which we do journalism. Like if we base journalism around, something that someone doesn't want printed, if that's the main element of it, like maybe we actually have to rethink foundationally how we do it. But there's also this other weird thing that's happening in the UK. There's a couple of like media outlets that are trialing it, and also some Scando places. Because young people don't have trust in the media, what they're doing is like showing their workings. So they'll do the story, but then they'll also explain like why they did the story this way, why they got these sources, why they went with this framing over this framing. And in like in one of the Scando presses, the press, one particular media company, puts this thing called ethics boxes on their stories.
It's like a Heart Foundation tick or something.
I guess something like that. It's like, the journalism equivalent of that, where they like explain their editorial decisions. It's like, we know you don't trust us.
Yeah.
Here is the work.
Okay.
And here is how we got to it. That's something.
Yeah. Well, that book on decline, that research on decline in trust and news fatigue also suggested that one of the remedies could be like a PR campaign for journalism, like as in to try and market it. And I just thought maybe you and I could be the faces of like trust us, everything is okay.
Have you lost faith in the mainstream media? Us too.
And then I just come behind you like this.
What's the solution? We don't have it.
I just thought if like Australian media wanted a marketing campaign, that I think you and I would be very good for it.
Yeah, you're the faces of Australian journalism. Okay, that's interesting. Let's pitch that. Let's see who picks it up.
Okay. I have a couple of other tips for
good for you,
for viewers and listeners. I mean, obviously they could do what you do to try and limit consumption. Don't ChatGPT your way out of a social media app blocker. But There is a listener called Paul who constantly, he emails and he BCCs me on emails that he sends to newspaper letters to the editor section. And he asks, he's like, do you mind if I keep CCing you? He feels really empowered to get his, like, to participate and to give feedback. And I love reading Paul's emails.
Do you know this guy?
No.
Oh, you just BCC'd on his emails.
Just Paul, right?
Oh, wow.
No, but he's a listener of the podcast and a follower of
Sure.
it.
Hello, Paul.
A lot of people are asking, they feel they want to feel empowered. They feel that they don't have agency, that news is something that's done to them and they don't agree with it and they don't agree with the framing. And so you could be like Paul and write letters to the editor. You could give tip-offs to us, people who feel that they're kind of participating in the news kind of ecosystem, or to Media Watch, but mainly us. Write letters of complaints to the Press Council if it's newspaper. I know that some people say, they've got as much, they'll get as much power or they'll get a slap on the wrist with wet lettuce. ACMA, the Broadcasting Authority, they did end up pinging Alan Jones and he got fined a couple of times over a bunch of different things, including the Cronulla Riots. ABC and SBS also have a formal complaints handling process that goes via the Ombudsman. So you could rage and share things on socials, but if you write an actual letter that has to go via the Ombudsman, they are ways in which you can feel more involved. I mean, and that does sound laborious, but for some people, I'm the sort of person at the gym, if I see that, the toilets are this, not clean, or the gym equipment is broken, I write to the gym. I am that person because I want to enjoy my gym environment. And
I would never do that.
Yeah, well,
see,
you're welcome because somebody does, and then the gym equipment gets replaced and the toilets get cleaned.
See, this is, I'm hearing all of the things that you're saying. They don't speak to me personally. I would never write a complaint letter. I just wouldn't. It's not, I've never, I'm one of those people that if someone overcharges me money for something, I would just leave the shop.
Okay.
And not have to deal with the admin that comes with having to bring that up. Even if I've been wronged personally in a scenario like that, if I have to fill out a form, even to get a good free thing, I just won't fill out the form.
Okay.
That's just, and maybe I'm deficient in that way.
Well, different things work for different people. So what would you suggest? Because that's one of my suggestions.
Okay. The one thing that I know that has helped me out, and okay, the blocker is one thing. I think that's just setting parameters, but also just being very deliberate. I always have to kind of come back to that mindset of just being very deliberate in what you consume. And so I say to myself, okay, I am going to put half an hour aside and I'm just going to go on, the news apps, for example. That's one way of doing it. And it's from 10 to 10:30. And then once 10:30 hits, I'm off.
Okay.
It doesn't always work. I will always fall off the horse, so to speak. But when I come back to that, I always feel much better.
Okay.
I feel like I've kind of actively engaged in something. I haven't been fed something against my will because I've made a conscious decision to do it.
Yep.
And then I've also made a conscious decision to stop doing it so it doesn't then bleed into my life.
Okay.
That's the best advice that I can give.
Okay.
Because I'm not writing a complaint letter to ACMA babe.
Okay, fair enough. Well, another thing that I find useful, because I still want to be engaged, I like to laugh, I like satire. I know last week I suggested the Chasers Instagram page, but there's also The Shot or Batuta Advocate, cartoons. I follow people who inform me about the absurdity of what's happening, but makes me laugh. A
little bit of icing there on the cake.
Because I think you've got to find joy, you've got to find laughter, and I know that my laughter is still very news and politics adjacent. So if it's not satire and you want to, step away and do things that actually bring you joy and remind you, and it sounds so cliche, but if you go outside and you do 10 star jumps or just sit in the sun, you'll just start to feel better.
Yeah, see, that's why
it's so it seems so silly, and I know I sound like some kombucha sipping yogi by suggesting this, but it works. There's a reason people tell you to do it, and you've just got to get outside and find the things that bring you joy.
And that's why I shirked half a day's work to go for a long walk.
Yes.
There you go.
And I completely, and I understood, and I was, there to support you. So you're very welcome.
Thank you.
See how I elicited that? I forced that? Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you. You make a great HR department for the media company that we work at. When you're not telling me to go fuck myself.
Yes. Okay, so something else that works to combat news fatigue is positive journalism and saying positive stuff about journalism. And that is why...
Dum, dum, dum!
It's a yes from me.
It is a yes from me. The segment, where we do exactly that. And my yes from me was relatively easy this week, and it centres around the reporting, as I said, of the Bendigo Writers Festival. Let me just give a super brief background to this in case there are some people that don't know what was going on. So Bendigo Writers Festival happened at the weekend. However, it was essentially like, I hate to use this word, but somewhat decimated.
Clusterfuck.
Clusterfuck?
Yeah.
Decimation. Dozens of authors pulled out. So I don't know exactly how the festival ran on the weekend.
And the booksellers pulled out.
And the booksellers pulled out. The reason that all of these folks pulled out of the Bendigo Writers Festival was because they were presented 2 or 3 days before the festival was going to go ahead with a code of conduct. I'm not going to go into the code of conduct except to say that essentially, too long didn't read version, please don't talk about Gaza. Okay? And the writers were like, some of whom were Palestinian, some of whom were First Nations writers.
Some of them who had a moral compass.
I'm sure all the rest of that
had a moral compass. They were like, yeah, nah.
We're like, hang on, we're not going to sign this code of conduct presented to us by your partners at La Trobe University. We have no choice but to pull out. And so they did, right? My yes is...
There is a yes
yeah,
in here.
there is a yes in
Yes,
here.
there's a
That's
yes.
the BG. But my yes goes this week to Deepcut News.
Our friends at Deepcut.
Okay, our friends at Deepcut. Look, I am a little bit biased. I'm just going to put that up the top. Yes, they are our friends. And I never praise people. You know that. I don't praise my friends.
Yes.
And especially when they're my friends, I feel like, oh shit, I should probably praise them less because people are going to think I'm biased. But in this instance, Deepcut, deepcutnews.com, which you can find on Substack, independent media company, they were the ones that I believe they broke the story. That's where I saw it first. If they didn't break the story, they definitely were one of the ones that had the story first about all of the writers pulling out of Bendigo. And then...
Or in solidarity with Randa Abdul Fattah, because she pulled out first. She's the most high-profile Palestinian academic and writer. She pulled out first, and then as I understood, in solidarity, the rest pulled out.
Yeah, I mean, there were sort of a bunch of people pulling out at the same time, but it was, that's what came to be sort of revealed there. But so Deepcut had the story first, but then they, to your point, broke a follow-up story, which is where they revealed that an organisation called Australian Academics Against Anti-Semitism had actually written to La Trobe University specifically about Randa to say that she shouldn't have been, part of the festival. And then sometime shortly after that, all of the writers were presented with the code of conduct. Right. So that was a story that was broken by Deepcut News that has since then been followed by the Australian mainstream media. So that's my yes to independent media breaking stories that you wouldn't otherwise see.
I know this is a yes from me segment, but I'm going to jump in with a little media tea that we have been served this morning. You may have also seen that Deepcut News published an article by Randa herself about her experiences, about being silenced by this festival, about the sustained attacks, and the fact that, how it all occurred and the solidarity shown by other authors. However, this article was commissioned by The Age. And so Randa wrote the article, submitted it to The Age, and then they had a bit of a change of heart. They got to the part where they were asking for a headshot, which is usually what they do. Give us a headshot, give us your bio. We're going to populate the page.
She'd written this piece.
She'd written this piece. It was commissioned, the agreed price, how many words. She'd written the piece. Then they had a change of heart. And I'm going to share some feedback that Randa gave to The Age.
Before you do that, why did they have a change of heart?
They said that the arts writer in another section was going to be writing an article, and Randa had supplied 1 or 2 short quotes for that. So they were like, that is adequate. What we do also know is that despite spiking Randa, they have since tried to continue getting another writer who had pulled out to publish. So this whole this story is covered, but this writer just happens to be a white writer who had pulled out from the Bendigo Festival. So
so for clarity, they spiked Randa's piece, but essentially
saying that it'd been covered elsewhere by the arts writer.
Right, but would continue to at least pursue this other writer who is non-Palestinian writing a similar-ish piece to Randa?
A similar-ish opinion piece, but just not happening to be Palestinian and from her perspective and the centre of the story. Randa is the centre of the story. And so she writes to The Age, I am the centre of this story. It beggars belief that a story about silencing me has resulted in your paper silencing me. The news gets better because Deepcut published the article in full.
Right.
Our friends at Deepcut were like, okay, we're going to publish this excellent article in full.
This excellent op-ed.
Yes,
Opinion
this
piece.
opinion piece, this excellent opinion piece in full.
So it was a yes, and then it went to a no, and then it
back
became
to
a yes.
We like to keep you on the edge of your seat, but it is wild that the woman at the center of these attacks, what has become such a huge story, was commissioned for an opinion piece by The Age about her silencing, and then was silenced herself by The Age.
It's a yes no yes. Anyway, the point being, why don't you go to deepcutnews.com, find them on Substack, subscribe to them, and you can read the piece by Randa that The Age spiked.
Yes.
Fortunately, there is an outlet where such pieces live on. So that's the yes.
Okay.
What's your yes?
Well, we have been in previous episodes urging our journalist peers to stand up for our slain Palestinian colleagues. We've been saying, where are you? Say something. And yes, while the Journo Union, the MEAA, has been putting out statements, a big campaign came out this week. You're featured in it.
I am.
More than 120 journalists from a range of media outlets, from ABC, 10, Guardian, 9, independent journos, some big wig figures like retired journo Kerry O'Brien. And I'm just going to, it's quite heartbreaking, but I think it's a great video that they put together, essentially calling to stop killing journalists, for Israel to stop killing journalists. Well, for journalists to stop being killed anywhere, but we know the vast, vast majority are being killed by Israel in Gaza.
MEAA members stand up against attacks on press freedom around the world.
Since October 2023, 265 journalists and media workers have been killed globally.
Of those, 174 were Palestinians killed by Israel in Gaza.
While the international media is locked out of Gaza, Palestinian journalists continue to work under sickness, under fire, under starvation to report the reality on the ground.
We remember our slain Palestinian colleagues.
Ibrahim Lafi, Mohammed al-Salhi,
As'ad Shamlak, Saeed al-Tawil, Mohammed Sabuh, Hisham al-Nawajha, Salam Meima,
Mohammed Fayez Yusuf Abu Matar.
The video goes on,
yes,
and on and on.
It does,
with all the names.
It does, and I guess there's two ways to look at that. The video does go on and on with the names of slain Palestinian journalists, but it also goes on and on with around 100 Australian journalists, reading out those names.
Yeah,
and I think we're 2 years in.
Yeah,
and this was before Anas al-Sharif was killed and his Al Jazeera colleagues were killed. This was a pressing, urgent matter before that. So I think people now just see that this is completely and utterly unacceptable, and that journalists are being targeted.
I agree.
So yeah, I'm glad it happened.
That's a definite yes from me. There is a little caveat, because despite the fact that a number of high-profile journalists and 100+ Australian journalists all got together to put out this call of stop killing journalists, there wasn't a single standalone article in the Australian press. I saw a little write-up kind of buried within a Guardian article. But given the fact I know that if I wear a particular brand, or if I fart, the freaking Daily Mail or News.com will write an article, the fact that this enormous show of solidarity for
breaking wind becomes breaking news.
There you are. Or outlets that focus on the media goings and comings, like Mumbrella or BNT or Media Week, nobody sought to cover this.
None of the media press had it.
No, none of the media press was like, peculiar. So that's a little negative caveat for an otherwise excellent video. So that is a yes from me.
A yes from me, with a couple of detours.
Yeah, a few caveats.
Yeah, a few caveats on the yes from us. Well, that is it then for our show this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know if we actually did a plug for support of this show, but if you would like to support us to continue making this show, please head on over to epmedia.com and hit that subscribe button. And we would be very, very grateful if you could subscribe with your dollars, because that is really what keeps us going.
There's another way you can Obviously, support with your dollars. We love it. We love you. But we do encourage you to hit follow if you're listening on a podcast platform. Rate and leave us a review. I need all the words of affirmation I can get because Jan doesn't give them to me. But also share the podcast or the YouTube show with your friends, your frenemies. All of it helps.
It does. And one thing that I'll say, and I mean this when I say this, because a lot of people say it and they don't mean it and they get very offended when it happens, but we love feedback.
Yeah.
We genuinely love feedback.
We do, yeah.
So constructive criticism, please.
Yeah.
So if you do have any feedback about how you think this show could improve or topics that we can cover or what you'd like to hear or what's working and what's not, you either DM us or drop us a comment in whatever comment section you're currently watching this on. Yep. We would be very happy to iterate. Oh my God, listen to this corporate speak.
And we will circle back.
And we will circle back, and I hope this email finds you well, and kind regards. Speak soon next week. Bye-bye.